you're talking about income inequality, and you've been saying that for a while, that is an issue that we as a country are going to have to address at some point.
And I'm not arguing on the merits of economic theory. I'm not arguing socialism, capitalism, the free market, the strangled market, the manipulated market. I mean, I enjoy that, and I read a lot about that. And Larry's one of our really good callers when we have these sorts of debates. And Larry and I see the world in a very similar way. I just see it in a more political way. I guess once a politician, always a politician. So I'm always, thinking about the angle. How do you angle on this? Because this could be problematic for your team. Larry just said he's an economist, so to speak. So he looks at things in a more pure way than I do, probably a more accurate way than I do. But I always consider the political fallout, the political consequences. And I think that the Republicans have to be careful to not get on the bad side of the income inequality political debate. I'm not talking about the reason it happened. I mean, there's a lot of reasons it happened. I think the allowance of China into the World Trade Organization has a lot to do with income inequality in America. I believe that. I believe that unfair exchange rates they've contributed over the long run to the United States has lost 22 or 3%. So nearly one of four factory jobs has left this country in less than 20 years. I mean, just get your arms around that. One of every four factory jobs has left this country since 2000. So I believe that China and allowing China to be admitted into the World Trade Organization because they don't play by the rules everybody else plays by. And they're not a global foe like Russia was. They're not, our geopolitical enemy, but because they have an incredible military. They probably have a very adept military, but the main reason is their economic prowess, that they've been able to successfully from a distance. Now, I think up close and personal is probably a whole different story. I mean, I think there are people in China living under the heavy hand of government, but they've been able to balance in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's a real challenge to run those communist, capitalist countries.
It is. It's very much. It's a challenge to call yourself a communist regime and welcome Starbucks and Polo, and Gucci and Cartier. And, there's a lot of millionaires being created in China as we speak in a communist country. So the sheer size of China, 1.45 billion people. I mean, put that in proportion. There's 325 or 30 million Americans, and we're a damn big country. There's a billion more Chinese. And they've got this balance of communism and the free market. And I don't know how they've done it, and I don't know that anybody understands how they've done it because they've kept the data to themselves. They release their GDP. We don't have a clue whether the Chinese economy is growing at 10% or 1%. We have no idea. I think they're struggling as we speak because I think the tariffs have taken a toll on China. I think the reason that they are very interested in coming to some agreement, and I believe there'll be an agreement in the next 45 days. I think that there'll be an agreement with China and America as it relates to trade, because if you have a trade partner and one country buys a lot more than they sell, they have a superior influence in that debate. But going back to your question about income inequality, I do believe that the allowance of China into the World Trade Organization, because China is known for what? Cheap labor. I mean, they don't have an EPA. They don't have an OSHA. They don't have these government agencies that insist on certain things be done in the labor market that cause things to be more expensive if they're manufactured in that said country. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying one country operates on one set of rules, the other on a completely and totally different set of rules. So when we say, well, it's just too expensive to make things in America, it's not about the price of the American worker. It's the bureaucratic overlayers that make producing something here far more expensive than in China, because China is a communist country. They do control, by and large, the means of production. They decide who makes the widgets. They decide where the widgets get made. Now and then they have figured out some way, and once again, it probably looks a lot different up close than it does from afar, but they figured out a way to allow Starbucks and Polo and Ford and GM into that country to some degree enough to suggest that they get capitalism, that they understand, how that can lift people out of desperate places and desperate straits. And then once again, China creates a lot of millionaires. All right. Job outsourcing. I think that plays into the China narrative, the Malaysia narrative, the India narrative. I think here's the great question, and here's where I disagree with a lot of my more capable friends. Technology and outsourcing. Technology and globalization. Most of my friends believe that I'm heavy-handed toward globalism and less inclined to blame technology. We have these debates over meals, and they're like, "Oh, man, you gotta admit that globalism was inevitable." Well, it was, and then they'll argue, "Well, technology led to globalism." It did. It absolutely did. The computer, the internet, the digital era we live in. There is no doubt that absolutely increased the likelihood that we were going to live in a more modern global economy. And the American worker has paid a price as a result of that modern global economy. The numbers are crystal clear. Once again, 23% of all factory jobs gone. I mean, gone since 2000, not since 1970, since 2000, less than 20 years. The deindustrialization of America has hollowed the American middle class. And then when you look at Trump, and I even argued yesterday with these ladies I met with about the school, that a lot of your 75-25, a lot of your 60-40 turning into 75-25 was some of this Trumpism, the political discontent, the people who just don't trust anybody that tells them this is the way things have to be. And I'm proud of that. I want to be associated and affiliated with that. And I'm not saying technology is not more important than globalism. What I've always argued, and you've heard me say it numerous times on this show, globalism is a political ideology. Technology did not automatically kick globalism into high gear. I mean, I've gone back and looked at some of the votes. I went back and read verbatim NAFTA and how they gerrymandered NAFTA and how they dealt and maneuvered and massaged NAFTA. NAFTA was a bad policy, and the globalists knew it was a bad policy, not for corporations, but for the worker. For the American worker, there is no way you can read that legislation with a straight face and say, hey, this is going to be good for the American worker. And Ross Perot said it better than I. He was a quirky, weird cat, but he said, they're the jobs. That sucking sound you hear are the jobs leaving America. Well, since 2000, once again, 23% of all factory jobs have fled this country. So when you ask me what causes income inequality, I do believe it is, Larry made a point, the way the government treats, assets, the way government treats capital gains, the way government treats all these differing things. When Amazon doesn't pay any federal income tax, it's because Amazon has a lot of assets. They can depreciate a lot of those assets, and that helps them on their tax liability. But I think that contributes to income inequality. I think that is the public persona, the public face of income inequality. When an average guy reads in the Wall Street Journal or the local news or CNBC, that Amazon paid no federal income tax. Excuse my French, it pisses them off. It really does, because they know how hard it is to keep their heads above water. They know how much college costs. That's what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing the merits of economic theory. I'm not arguing that we need to consider socialism to address income inequality. I'm not arguing any of that. I'm just saying there are a lot of things that have been layered upon one another that have made income inequality a hot-button issue in American politics, and I'm not sure the Republicans have a serious enough interest in what the causes were. I think they understand that income inequality is real in America. I think they understand. I mean, the numbers are crystal clear. The wealthiest 1% control more of this country's wealth than they ever have. And the disparity of controlling that wealth with what I'd call the working poor is growing bigger and bigger. I'm not talking about the lazy butts. I'm not talking about the people who choose to sit on the front porch and smoke cigarettes all day. I'm talking about the guy that gets out and works a job and makes $12, $15 an hour, but is trying to raise a family of 5. That's the person I'm talking about. I have no sympathy nor empathy whatsoever for that individual sitting on that front porch, smoking a cigarette, trying to find the right guy to vote for, the right lady to vote for, because they'll continue some program. I'm talking about the working guy who got up this morning and is trying his best to keep his head above water. That's the income inequality issue I'm talking about. And I'm going to tell you, you can't turn a blind eye. It's real. It's relevant, and I think it's more pervasive than a lot of people believe. And I would argue that a lot of the income inequality issues of the past election went Donald Trump's way. Donald Trump didn't talk a lot about addressing income inequality. What did he talk about? You know, the elites have sold you out. They created policy. They enacted policy that was not in your best interest. Allowing China into the World Trade Organization, I think, had a monumental impact on the American economy. I just believe that. I think you basically let a communist rogue nation into an organization that they have no business being a part of. You legitimized the way they run their economy. We got to deal with them. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The sheer enormity of the population and the economic output, you're going to have to deal with them. And they are, in my opinion, the geopolitical foe of the next 100 years. I believe that. But because they're not believers in freedom and liberty, and they manipulate their free market far more than we do. But I think the big debate, and it still is, you know, the technology globalism part of it. How much did technology lead to globalism, and how much globalism or the globalization of our economy was about a political ideology to advantage American corporations to the expense of the American worker? And I know what I'd say every single day. If I was running for office today in the Midwest, I'd say, look, your politicians sold you out to the corporate interest. And I understand that, because that's what politicians do. They help people who help them. And if you're offended by that, you just don't understand American politics 101. People give money and raise money for candidates and campaigns who do things in their best interest. That's the way the American political system works. The miscalculation was the failure to understand that you are not a number, you are a human being. And when your job left this country to go to India, to go to China, to go to Malaysia, to go to wherever, that was a large part of your personal worth, your value, your human dignity, in very many cases is connected to that place of employment, that job, that ability to provide for your family. It's intuitive. It's just who you are. It's primal, to be honest with you. And I think the ruling class, the elites, the establishment failed to understand. They clearly understood the economics of it. They clearly understood that Ford Motor Company can make trucks cheaper in Mexico. We need to do what we can to help Ford because Ford helps us. And if company ABC can make widgets in China cheaper than they can in Peoria, Illinois, we need to help that country make widgets to be more profitable, because at the end of the day, they'll probably contribute to our campaigns in a higher percentage. But the miscalculation, the great miscalculation, and this is what we're trying to deal with today. This is the most intense. What do I say about the school board? 60-40 turned into 75-25. And people think I'm a little bit weird when I say this because of political discontent. You're asking for more money? No. For what? No. To do what? No. To better it? No. To improve? No. No. I'm not giving you rascals another red cent. And the school board in Florence has nothing to do with globalization or technology or outsourcing or China being in the World Trade Organization. But they do. They're absolutely connected one to another, because political discontent is the most intense political force in America today. And it is the only reason that when people said I was foolish to do so, I said Donald Trump was going to be the president. And as sure as I was that Trump was going to win that election, I am equally as sure that the Republicans better be careful in not being as dismissive of income inequality as some appear to be ready to be. You just better be careful with it. You can be absolutely opposed to socialism, 100%, absolutely, unequivocally. The nuts want to run the country like Russia and Venezuela and Cuba, and we can't let that happen. But you better not be dismissive about income inequality, or it'll bite you in the behind. Back in a minute. Good morning, PD, Live 95.